All right, howdy. Sorry for the delay. I'm Patrick Foley with Microsoft, and my title is literally evangelist. I focus on ISVs. Normally I have to tell people what that means, so it's kind of refreshing to have a whole group of people who already know what the word ISV means. I'm going to tweet a link to these slides at the end of this presentation. In fact, I have it scheduled, so it might even be there a little before the end, but I didn't want people reading through it from the beginning. So Patrick Foley is my Twitter handle. You can find these slides after the presentation. Feel free to reach out to me anytime on Twitter or at patrick.foley@microsoft.com. All right. This is, there's always lots of new stuff from Microsoft, always. Probably the one that I've seen getting the biggest notice here is Windows 8, and even a part of that, the fact that Microsoft is now even going to be making its own hardware, the Surface. How many people here had heard that Microsoft was making the Surface? Yeah, almost everybody. That one didn't exactly sneak up on people. Unfortunately, the secrecy around the hardware device was so good that nobody on my team, which had some of the most, not me, but some of the best Windows 8 evangelists in the country, none of them even knew that it was going to be announced officially until it was announced. So what that also means is I don't know anything more about the hardware device than has been stated publicly. So if you're hoping to get more details about that, I'm not really going to be able to help you. But it is obviously very cool, even what's been announced publicly. Microsoft is huge. We have an enormous amount of products, and there's always something new. So unfortunately, I won't be able to be talking about all of them. I'm definitely going to be missing something. And I won't even be able to talk in depth about any of them. So I'm going to be covering a few different products with specifically a focus on how you make money out of them. So I'm going to be covering, by necessity at a high level, trying to focus on the issues that I think you're going to care about from the standpoint of making money. Stop me at any time, ask a question, shout it out. And I'm also going to try to finish up on time that we can have a bit of a separate Q&A session as well. So, for starters, Windows 8. Obviously, that's the thing on everybody's mind. And I think it has a bit of a Reese's peanut butter cup quality to it. Peanut butter and chocolate, two things together. There's several things mixed together in Windows 8. It is both at one time a tablet and PC experience. So I am running, this is my, carefully lift this up. This is my notebook that I've been carrying around since before. I don't know why that flickers off when I close the screen because I have it do nothing, but anyway. This is just my laptop. It does not have a touch screen, and yet I'm running Windows 8. And this doesn't meet the display minimum, so it looks kind of weird. But when I hit the Windows button, yes, the Start menu has been replaced by this. To tell you the truth, the course of my day, I still spend 99% of my time in desktop apps, and it looks a heck of a lot like Windows 7. You know, I've still got all my pinned sites here. Yes, I use Chrome for some things. You know, all that functionality, it still works as expected. There's not the little circle there, but I never hit that circle anyway. I always hit the Start button, and that brings up this stuff. So you just get used to it. One little thing, I do admit, for like the first half day, I couldn't figure out where's the search thing. You know, God, you've got to have search. I never look for things in my Start menu. Turns out it's there all the time. You just have to start typing. So that might screw you up the first time. It screwed me up. So once you know it, it's obvious. There are a few things like that. I think there's a pattern of user experiences at Microsoft going to the Metro, the user interface design language, more than Metro, the Windows 8 app style. Does anyone know what that means? Okay, Metro was originally a user interface design language. It was invented for the Zoom, which even though it didn't sell well, find me a negative review of the Zoom. Almost everybody thought this was a great device and really revolutionary. It had a new user interface style that the team who invented it called Metro. Part of that was discoverability and a certain level of fun that as you use something more and more, features are revealed to you. Metro came out in full force with Windows Phone. So Windows Phone uses the Metro design language Windows 8 also uses the Metro design language, but perhaps to confuse things for everyday folk, apps designed specifically for the Windows 8 full screen experience and Windows RT are called Metro style apps or Metro apps. So this is just that flat Metro design language that I'm very used to and am very fond of, and this is a specific Metro app, the photo viewer. Does that make sense? Okay. As I said, it feels a whole heck of a lot like Windows 7, except with better battery life and faster at some things. It is still not a released product, so even though the product itself is really close to RTM, not all the drivers are. This laptop is pretty stable. One of my laptops, I won't name names, but it's a beautiful laptop, and I hope they stabilize the drivers so that I can show it off to you next time. But other than that, it feels pretty normal. So I always hit Window D to get to the desktop. That's my go-to shortcut. Anyway, it works great on a PC, but that Metro style is obviously also optimized for a touch experience. So that's why some people said, hey, why not just put that on the tablet only and have desktop on Windows 8? That's not the direction the team is going. We want Metro everywhere. So, but it works great on both tablet and PC, the same version of Windows. Which I covered the second one at the same time. Both Metro apps, full screen apps, and desktop apps. So again, I've got all these other desktop apps. All the desktop apps you've written almost will certainly still run on Windows 8. Importantly, ARM and Intel. So Intel architecture is still first class, still supported. There is one of the versions of the Surface tablet is an Intel version. It's slightly thicker. It essentially does everything that a laptop can do, but it's in the form factor of a tablet. The other version of Surface runs Windows RT, which is for the ARM architecture. It does everything that the Intel version does in the Metro environment, but you can't write desktop apps for it, as I mentioned in the early session. Only Microsoft Office can use the desktop. And there's another combination. When you are creating Metro apps, there are now 3 first-class experiences, which is really, really cool. And ultimately, I think an under-reported aspect of these changes. There were several things converging at once. Different teams were working on things that converged into Windows 8. One of the teams with the architectural underpinnings behind Windows RT is amazing. And it's the continuing thread of COM to .NET to this new thing called Windows RT. One of the results is you can write applications, you can write Metro apps in HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. It's a first-class experience, and you're going to see a lot of apps that were written with HTML5. Okay, that opens up the world of Windows development to the biggest language out there, JavaScript and HTML. But there are more JavaScript developers than there are any other language. So we're hoping to get a much bigger tent, get a lot more people in. If you were used to .NET development and WPF or Silverlight, that model doesn't go away. That's also a first-class experience, and I actually suspect it's going to be the model that most of the people in this room will choose. The XML markup language is called XAML for that, so instead of WPF or Silverlight, it's called XAML with your .NET language of choice, C# or VB typically. And finally, C++ is a first-class language again, which is pretty cool. For a while there, C++ didn't get as much attention, and now it is again, which opens up the world of game developers. Windows 8 is probably going to be more attractive to game developers again. And one of the cool things is there's interactivity between things. So you can write a component in C++ and write a user interface on top of it with HTML5, or vice versa. So there are a lot of interesting things that we're going to be seeing as a result of that. So why should you support Windows 8? I can think of a billion reasons. We have more than 1 billion users of Windows now, reported earlier this week at WPC. Actually, 1.3 billion users of Windows. As I said to people, if we satisfy 99% of the Windows users out there, that means only 10 million users will hate us. So it's a different scope of thinking about the user base for Windows. Included in that is 680 million licenses of Windows 7 have been sold. So a mediocre uptake of Windows 8 is still hundreds of millions of people using it. So if you have not considered supporting Windows 8, and particularly the new app model, I think it's worth reconsidering that decision. This is a market like none other that we've seen. If you were pretty sure the iPad was going to succeed, because the iPhone was a success, I think this is even a safer bet that many, many, many people will see your apps if you develop for Windows 8. We discussed this a little bit earlier. One of the biggest developments and important from your business perspective is the Windows Store. As I mentioned, the goal is to be as transparent as possible. We're not going to succeed all the time. There's going to be places where the implementation hasn't reached up to the goal, but I honestly see internally that people are trying to be as transparent as possible. We want a smooth process for getting your apps approved and into the store. Some kinds of apps will not be approved into the Windows Store, adult content, etc. Other kinds of apps, a gentleman mentioned to me earlier, a kind of app that a Microsoft or an Apple might have possible concerns about piracy, for example. I honestly can't tell you. I don't know where Microsoft is going to step into that process. I don't know if you have a reason. It's kind of like the VHS, right? All the content, all the movies were afraid that people were going to use it to pirate content. Every new recording technology, movie studios are afraid of that. Yet the VHS got produced. If your app has obvious utility that's non-pirating, I'm almost certain it will be approved, even if it has possible use that is pirating. If your only purpose is pirating, I don't know if Microsoft is going to take an active role and say, no, we don't want you playing in our yard. I'm pretty sure the terms of service are written so that if we wanted to, we could take that role. It is a closed sandbox. It's not like the world of Windows as you've known it in the past, where anyone can get in and play around. Windows 8 Metro apps are not that way. Lots of flexibility, so you'll be able to have time-limited trials or feature-limited trials and have people upgrade using our commerce engine or an external commerce engine, which Christopher mentioned earlier today. That might help alleviate some of the concern that I've heard from some ISVs who are already successful. Well, if I'm selling $100,000 worth of software today, you're going to be taking $30,000 of that, so I have to be, sell more software to make up for that. Hypothetically, you can use a third party, you can install a free version and handle the commerce of upgrading to the paid version yourself. So that's one model to do that if you're willing to go through the pain of doing that. But more importantly, hopefully the store process and the trust that is built up with users and the exposure that you're going to get by being part of this experience. This was Andy Bryce who mentioned that. So wedding software. Okay, I'm not finding anything. Let me search in the store. I doubt I'm going to find anything now. Hey, Andy, maybe you do want to put maybe you want to put a perfect table plan in there because someone's going to look for that and find it. I think that's probably worth the cut we're going to take. Make sense? I keep getting there. One little detail of that. So we are taking. Yeah, go ahead.
So, do you guys have any thoughts on the review and certification process? I mean, having been through the XBLA certification process, I sure hope this one's going to be a lot more streamlined.
I'm sorry. Which one?
The certification process.
For which one was bad that you referred to?
Xbox Live Arcade.
Oh, okay.
The certification process is pretty thorough and extensive for that. Now, obviously, that's a console and not.
Yep.
But even the App Store, it has a significant delay now, and there's obviously a lot more potential apps here. So, does Microsoft have any plans to try and make sure that rush is going to be dealt with, and that there'll be timely, handling of that?
I know we have plans. That's not the same. That's not to say we might mess up or there could be surprises that we didn't anticipate. But as I mentioned, internally on my team, when we're working with some specific customers trying to get into the Windows 8 store, we're currently planning on, let's give ourselves a week at least to get this process lined up, and deal with possible hiccups when because we're working with them, we're pretty sure it's going to be approved. But there's still a little bit back and forth there. That's not a promise, but those are the kinds of cycles as an app writer that I would be thinking of, kind of normal hiccups as opposed to an interminable process. We're going to try really hard to make it work as well as possible for developers. By the way, part of the transparency element is that the same apps, the same utilities that we're running to disqualify apps that don't meet certain criteria, as much as possible, we're making those available to you to pre-test, in fact, forcing you to pre-test before you even submit. So that as much as possible, this would have been rejected because I didn't do this or did this, and saving cycles there as much as possible. I can say everything I see is that we're taking it really seriously. I'm not on that team, so I can't, say anything like that. By the way, I mentioned on the surface that I don't know any more than you do publicly, but I will say something anecdotally that when the Surface came out, many, many customers on my team that we had been, and typically at this point in the process, it's been larger customers, that we had been talking to about Windows 8 and getting the response, we're going to wait and see. When that Surface announcement came out, a lot of those customers had said, we're ready, we're going to do this. So clearly when Microsoft producing our own version of the hardware and one that looks pretty cool, anecdotally, I would say the developer interest is very, very high, and the business interest is very, very high. So we're using the traditional, taking the 30% cut, leaving you with 70% in App Store model in the Windows Store. Once you sell $25,000 worth of software on a per app basis, that's not per app account or per version, it's for a specific app. Once you make $25,000, your cut of that revenue goes up to 80%. And that includes in-app purchases when you use our commerce engine. So you could offer a free version of the app or a $1.49 version of the app and sell $10,000 worth of your $1.49 version or $0 worth of your free version. But once you sell $25,000 worth of combined that plus in-app purchases, then your take goes up to 80%, which is better than the industry. The other aspect of that is you can use third-party commerce again. There's no restrictions on in-app purchases and things like that. And we have a pretty darn good ad network that I wouldn't sneeze at. If you have the kind of product, I was thinking a little bit, Phil, also for the kinds of utility products where, boy, when you need them, you really need them. I'm wondering how many of those might be useful for free things as well. Creating basic free utilities that say, yes, your machine is running fine, you're doing all right, and including advertising in there, yours and others. Adding ads to apps is pretty simple. It's also pretty simple in Windows Phone. And obviously, before you make money, you got to get eyeballs. But when you do get the eyeballs, it's pretty easy to make money by adding ads. All right. If you are currently doing desktop apps, you still should go through the process. And as Christopher mentioned this morning, I don't think you can do it yet. I think you're going to just have to wait till RTM and then stumble through and figure it out. But because obviously we're going to be focused on Metro apps, where all of our energy is going to be on getting more Metro apps into the store. So we're not going to have a lot of energy we're not going to be focusing on helping people with desktop apps get them listed in the store. You will be able to do it, and you'll be able to ultimately have a link that sends people to your app to get it. So using that wedding store example, wedding software, if Andy Bryce, Perfect Table Plan had this in the store, I assume, at a minimum, he should get his, even if he's not going to build a Metro app, he could at least get his desktop app listed in the store with a link to his download. That becomes another search engine. Essentially, it's nearly free advertising for your application that you already have. So I strongly encourage anyone to do that. Yeah.
So I assume you're going to have some sort of user feedback rating system. I haven't seen
Yes.
any of the demos you've given, but
I will show you. So let me go to the store. Oops.
What do you mean by nearly free?
I meant your time, and I think there's there's a fee for getting an account in the store. I think it's $50 for an individual developer, $100 for a company. And I don't know off the top of my head if you need to have that account to register your desktop software. I suspect you do. So that's not a lot of money for the kind of exposure you're likely to get.
You get that now.
I'm not sure you can get it now. Yeah? Is that Christopher back there?
Some of us who are working with the evangelist team have developer IDs already. So if you're in the pipeline now, working with an evangelist, my understanding is we're getting IDs directly handed to us from the evangelist.
Yeah. But as you said, they're kind of it's in a little bit of a dark period between now and RTM.
Right.
If you don't already have one, realistically, I think you're going to have to wait till RTM. One thing, in my opinion, one of the implications of moving to a marketplace model like this, same with iPhone or Google Play or whatever, is I don't think it pays to release crap too early, because bad reviews can kill you, and then you're never gonna recover from that. I would even, in my opinion, there's something to be said for if you're building a simple phone app even, or an app that could reasonably play in a web browser. Do your customer development in the web browser and make sure that people like what you're trying to solve, and then build the app, in my opinion. Christopher?
Do you know anything about the rating system and the overall ratings? Is it going to be overall rating for the app, overall rating for versions?
I don't know off the top of my head if it resets at versions. I don't think it does, but I don't know off the top of my head. So even if you don't intend to develop a Metro app, you should still pay attention to the Windows Store. I just think it's it's kind of silly not to, but wait till RTM next month. Metro apps, if you are building a Metro style app, the only way to deliver it is essentially through the Windows Store. There is an exception for enterprises. The Enterprise edition of Windows 8, enterprises will essentially have their own way of managing getting Metro apps onto devices, and also allowing or disallowing what kind of Metro apps get on there. So it's a rich experience there. But everyone else, even if you're using an outside commerce engine, your app has to go through the Metro Store, and that's partly about building trust. I'm going to move on from Windows 8, but I would say the message is get in early. One of the other speakers yesterday, I apologize that I don't remember who. Yes?
Just curious about the Metro apps. What if, for example, one of my clients, he has a program that he uses, there are about 10 people that use it. Would he be able to supply his 9 employees or whatever with the Metro app without going through the store? They would never be made available for sale.
It's enterprise.
I believe the only way to do that is with Enterprise. Otherwise, he's going to have to. What I would probably do is you know, I apologize that I don't remember off the top of my head. You know, obviously he's going to have authentication that only his people will have, and Azure is great for that. But I think what people are typically going to do is make that a free app, and it's only meaningful to people who can use it and just not care about the ratings. I could be wrong on that, so if you want to follow up with me, send me an email, and I will double check. As I was going to say, get in early. This is a rare opportunity. People have mentioned it at the beginning of every platform. iPhone, Android, iPad, even Windows Phone. When you get in early, you have all kinds of advantages over the other players in the space. And even at RTM, it's going to be early. There's going to, even if we, as I said, even if we fail, this is a great opportunity for you. So get in early. Yeah.
Where?
Sorry?
Where do we get in?
Dev.windows.com. Go to dev.windows.com, and that's going to be your home base for figuring out how to get into the Windows Store.
Any point in going there now, or should we wait for August?
You can go there now and explore and play around. And actually, after I tweet this deck, I'll tweet out another link. It's actually within dev.windows.com. It's actually a little bit hard to find the store link, so I'll tweet that out separately if you look at that. But learn about it, but I would wait until RTM. If you're not building a Metro, if you're building a Metro app, get work on the development right now. If you're not going to build a Metro app, learn about the store and just be ready at RTM. Aaron.
What's going to happen with licensing?
What do you mean?
Now with a desktop app, you can say it can only be on this one system, but then you're going to have customers signing into tons of different computers. They buy it once and then.
Right. I think again, I apologize. I switched from Azure, so all of these important little details are not on the. I switched from Azure at the beginning of this month, so all of the important details are not on the tip of my tongue. But I believe the licensing model for Windows 8 Metro apps is 5 devices. So when you buy an app, you can install it on up to 5 devices automatically. Does that answer your question? What's that? And your involvement in the Metro store is your ability to buy is inherently authenticated, and it's your only way to get on the app. So frankly, a lot of the sharing aspects of that you've had in the past, a lot of those go away because I can't give it to my wife unless she's logging in as the same user ID, which who wants that? Not her. Okay. So that's Windows 8. I wanted to mention Windows Phone 8 as well, and don't laugh, it's not disappearing. I copied this graph that showed, here's Microsoft up here. This is a very important milestone that we just passed, which is our decline of the combination of Windows Mobile and Windows Phone has just reversed. So for the first time. People, you think it's good starting from like 15% market share, but when you reboot from 15% market share and which we did with Windows Mobile, and let that decline, then anything good you're doing with Windows Phone, you're not starting from 0, you're starting from 15 and moving backward. So Windows Phone is actually doing pretty well. It just doesn't look like it because we've been shrinking. Now finally, it is growing again, just this past month, going in that direction. And we're doubling down. We're not getting out of Windows Phone. So a couple quick points. Windows Phone 8, new devices are expected this fall, whatever that means. Old devices will not be able to install Windows 8 proper, but they will be able to get Windows Phone 7.8, which has most of the features that could have been implemented on that hardware. So some of the features of Windows Phone 8, like multi-core, simply aren't possible on Windows Phone, and there are various hardware features that just would not have been possible. Anything that could have been delivered has pretty much been is going to be going into a largely updated version of Windows Phone 7.8. So you can get new tile experience, like different sizes of tiles. That'll be available on existing devices. It's just it won't be called Windows Phone 8. A huge change is that the Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 share the same operating system core. Windows Phone 7 had Windows CE as a core. Now Windows Phone 8 will have the same full Windows core as Windows 8. What that means is there's going to be even more code sharing across platforms. Does it mean you'll be able to run a phone app on Windows? Not quite, but the same HTML5, XAML, C++, all of those will be supported on Windows Phone just as they will be on Windows. And then everything is clearly going in the direction of converging. The browser is updated. We have dual core, new resolutions, including smaller and bigger, support for micro SDs, near field communication. Our partnership with Nokia means that everyone, even non-Nokia phones, are getting some of the benefit of that. Nokia has great maps, and so Nokia mapping technology is going to be built into Windows Phone 8. The start screen has been enhanced. They have smaller tiles, multiple colors, different kinds of arrangements, more enterprise features, kind of think to the kind of features that would compete head-on with BlackBerry, for example, in companies that want to be extra cautious about security. There will be a company hub, which is really cool, Windows Phone 8. You'll be able to have, to the experience that you were talking about on Windows 8, gosh, I must be wrong about that. Please follow up with me afterward. But so certainly on Windows Phone, you'll be able to have a company-specific hub that only employees of that company will be able to download and have apps just for that company easily available, which is cool. Audible book integration is going to be built in. Actually, Audible, the company, will have an app, including search, play, and pause, all those kinds of things. This is an opportunity, so I want to pause on that one for a second. Any developer can add speech capabilities in Windows Phone 8. So Siri is kind of a closed system, right? Windows Phone 8 is, what's on Windows Phone 7 is darn good, but I wish as a developer I could get at it and do cool things with it. You can launch apps with it, but that's about it. You're going to be able to integrate speech and speech recognition capabilities into Windows Phone 8. That's pretty cool. That's an opportunity that I think people should be noodling on. PayPal and other kinds of integrated payment capabilities. And yes, Skype is coming, although it seems like we've been saying Skype has been coming for quite a while on these things since we did buy it. But similar to the speech, there's something more important there that we're building in the APIs and infrastructure to support generalized VoIP applications into Windows Phone 8. What that means is if you don't like Skype, or if you want to, if you have a specific application where VoIP capabilities would really light it up, or you just want an ultra simplified experience, you're going to be able to build VoIP into your Windows Phone 8 applications. So again, a couple of those things, speech and the VoIP, I think that's enormous opportunity for developers, business-oriented developers. And the point about getting in early also applies to Windows Phone 8. I used to do a podcast, I just quit, used to do a podcast with Bob Walsh, who's a member of this community as well. And if you search for Startup Success Podcast 126, you'll hear from these guys named Analog Apps, where these guys are app developers. They develop for iPhone, they develop for Android, and they develop for Windows Phone. There was mostly educational apps. They built the same app on iPhone and Windows Phone at the same time. They made 5 times more money on Windows Phone than they did on the iPhone. So your mileage might vary, but the assumption that you're not going to make money on Windows Phone because we don't have market share is patently false. So if you're thinking about creating mobile apps, I encourage you to check out Mobile Phone. Please listen to this particular episode of the podcast and make your own judgment and see what's best for you. It all has to do with, there's advantages to not competing with as many apps, and also the way we organize our app store might fit you better. Any questions on Windows Phone? All right, as I mentioned, I moved from this past fiscal year, which ended in, boy, I'm running way over, I think. No worries? Okay. My position is more about the who than the what. So the who kind of stays ISVs, but the what changes because we're constantly changing our software. This year, Windows 8 is the biggest deal going on. Last year, Windows Azure was a new launch. So Windows Azure, I think, is pretty relevant to any developer who doesn't do strictly desktop-oriented apps. If you have a back end, Windows Azure is a great way to go. Really quickly, I want to explain what Windows Azure is. How many people here are familiar with Windows Azure? Okay, most people. I'll be quick about this, but ask any questions if it doesn't make sense. In a traditional IT setting, the customer manages everything. With infrastructure as a service, which is what Amazon came out with, they were kind of the first true cloud provider. The vendor, Amazon for example, managed the bottom part of the stack, the hardware. The customer managed everything from the OS on up, but you still had to manage the operating system. You had to apply patches, etc. With platform as a service, the vendor manages not just the virtualization infrastructure, but the guest operating system itself, and the middleware, and the runtime for the database, and things like that. So Windows Azure, by default, when you think about Windows Azure, all you're really worried about is writing your application code and managing your data. Okay, you're writing a chunk of code and operating it out on the cloud. It's a much higher level of abstraction than infrastructure as a service. Then when you develop a SaaS application, so Ted's application is SaaS, his customers don't care about the operating system or the database or anything like that. They just care about his app. The vendor manages all of it. So by default, Windows Azure fits in, lets you focus on just these two things. But last month, we also released in preview, now we're competing head-on against the infrastructure as a service providers as well. What does that mean? it means now if you have existing virtual machines that you want to run on our cloud instead of Amazon or Rackspace or whatever, you can run them on Windows Azure as well. That includes Linux VMs. So even if you are an open source developer, Microsoft is quite relevant to you now. If you're running the LAMP stack or Ruby on Rails, you can run that very, very effectively on Windows Azure. Part of that story is open source. I bet a lot of people here never thought that. I got to give credit to bbsradio.com/BBC for that specific image because I had to use it. As I said, Linux is running on Windows Azure. For even longer, it's been very, very well supported on Windows Server inside of Hyper-V. In the past, Microsoft didn't seem to play well with open source technologies or want to have anything to do with them. That is not at all the case now. We are embracing things. It is quite a different world. You could notice this happening when we embraced things like jQuery early on and said, hey, instead of building I think we had ASP.NET AJAX services or something like that. And Scott Guthrie, our VP, who's actually in charge of Azure now, I think was very, very influential in this direction. When there's an open source product that's better and that just has all the uptake, let's go with that. So we support jQuery now, and we're a member of that open source community. We had invested quite a lot of money in something called Dryad, which was our big data kind of thing, and eventually said, the world chose Hadoop. Let's stop doing this other thing, and we're going to do open source Apache Hadoop. So now Hadoop runs really well on Windows Server and Windows Azure, etc. Parts of ASP.NET itself are being open sourced, so even though they come with Visual Studio, we've rolled those off and made them open source projects that people can contribute to, so that it's easier to make changes, etc. This one I'm particularly happy about. There's always a local storage model for something like a phone and for Windows 8, etc. That is literally SQLite in Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. So instead of just SQL Server Compact, which is what it would have typically been in the past, we're supporting SQLite, which is just easy and there and has all sorts of advantages. And we've rolled off, you may have heard of Port 25 as well, where we work with open source communities to make stuff work together. But we actually kind of rolled off a bunch of our open source initiatives and founded something called the Outer Curve Foundation, which is independent from Microsoft, but supported by us in certain ways, that's focused on nurturing various open source technologies. So, very, very different than what I think people expected in the past. Now, I mentioned Azure. It's a great product, but how does it make you money? If you happen to have a startup, I don't think actually many people here do, but if you have friends, if you're getting people into a startup, let them know about BizSpark, please. BizSpark.com. If you're less than 3 years old with less than $1 million in revenue, you pretty much can get into BizSpark. And also if you're creating software, not just doing consulting. It gives you all the tools for free, Visual Studio Ultimate, including MSDN. When you get that MSDN, and I apologize, this is kind of one of those things where, where's the free Azure in BizSpark? It's a couple levels deep. You have to look for it. It's part of the MSDN subscription that you get with BizSpark. It includes like $3,000 worth of Windows Azure hosting. You can host 2 cores, 2 simultaneous virtual machines for the whole year, plus a whole bunch of other stuff, SQL Azure, et cetera, et cetera. It's really a great deal. If you're not a startup, the closest thing to that is Action Pack. How many people here buy the Action Pack? Oh, okay, I'm preaching to the choir there. So you already know about it. Yes, as far as I know, this is the best way for you to get Microsoft tools without buying them. Recognize that it includes Visual Studio Professional. It doesn't include as much Windows Azure as Ultimate, but it does include 1 core pretty much the whole time. So you can be running a certain amount of Windows Azure for free if you have the Action Pack. So even if it's just for testing or whatever, don't neglect the free Azure that comes with that. Make sense? I was going to talk about the next version of Office, but it got redacted. I can't really tell you anything about it, unfortunately. There is a next version of Office. It's really cool. There's some really poorly kept secrets about it, so I thought they were public, but I went through to tell you, but I'm like, wow, we still can't talk about this apparently. So I would say stay tuned and learn firsthand from Office. Office has a great history of exposing functionality for ISVs, and it gets even better, is what I would say. How many people here currently build apps on Office? How many people have built an app on Office in the past? Okay, so potentially give it a chance again when you see this stuff coming up. How many people here build more enterprise-type software as opposed to consumer? Software for businesses as opposed to consumers? A quick note about doing that. From a perspective of truly partnering with Microsoft, that's where most of the opportunity is, in my opinion. A lot of great platforms to build on. So instead of just building on .NET or Windows, think of building on top of SharePoint or building on top of Dynamics CRM. A lot of really, really successful ISVs have done this. I'll get into more the reason why that matters so much, but recognize that every salesperson at Microsoft has a quota where they have to sell a certain amount of Office and a certain amount of SharePoint and things like this by the end of the year, right? They go into large companies and are trying to renew enterprise agreements, etc. If they know that your app requires SharePoint, do you think that salesperson is going to be happy about introducing you into their customers? That is what partnering, that is the golden, the golden, what's the metaphor? I'm sorry. What? Yeah, but that's not the right metaphor. I was wrong to begin with. Anyway, you know what I mean. That's the goal for partnering with Microsoft, is making your product something that other people want to sell. SharePoint is a great way to do that. Dynamics CRM is another great one. They both have online versions, Office 365, Dynamics CRM Online. There's also a bunch of Dynamics ERP products, same kinds of things. You get that benefit. So obviously we want to sell Windows Server, we want to sell SQL Server, but it's getting those higher level things that you can really get an uptake from partnering with Microsoft when you do that. Just from a solution perspective, recognize that SQL Server has gotten huge. There's functionality in SQL Server that you probably didn't know existed. I like to tell people it's there just to plan it in the back of your brain so that if you have a certain problem, remember that. There is fast track data warehouse. So if you happen to be doing data warehousing and want to kind of deliver a hardware solution, look at that. Parallel data warehouse is also a hardware solution that is automatic scale out. This is for typically for big customers who want to save every data point that they could possibly have. How many people here have heard of Power Pivot? Power Pivot is an add-on to Excel that's actually sold as part of SQL Server that essentially brings SQL Server analytical services processing into Excel. So you can have million record spreadsheets that have lightning quick response time. Very cool. And again, I think there are probably solutions that could be built on top of that you might not have thought about. Oops. And last one, Stream Insight. Surely no one here has anyone here heard of Stream Insight? That's for high volume event processing. It's not even, it's a C library. It's just sold as part of SQL Server, but it does really amazing things. If you have really, really high stream rate coming in that you have to get answers from right away. So imagine like the Super Bowl is getting all kinds of data, and they want to, you're advertising in the Super Bowl, and you want to make decisions on your online promotions based on data you get in real time. That's the sort of application that you'd use Stream Insight for. And finally, Link. How many people here know what Link is? That's probably why we bought Skype. I love Link. It's our enterprise phone system, if you will, with IM built in. It's really cool. Great opportunities for building solutions on top of. So if you have an interest in kind of enterprise-y corporate communication systems, there's all kinds of hooks and things you can build on top of Link, and it's a great way to deliver solutions. Okay, and don't forget Xbox and Connect as well, all kinds of cool stuff there, dev.xbox.com. I'm not a gamer and not a game developer, so I don't know the ins and outs of that. But my understanding is that this, things are more and more converging, where an app on Xbox looks more and more like an app on Windows 8, looks more and more like an app on Windows Phone 8. So I wouldn't forget about Xbox, even though it might be a little bit difficult to get started. Finally, again, for startups, Microsoft is starting to directly invest in companies for the first time, following industry trends. If you're building an application on Windows Azure, for example, there is the Windows Azure Accelerator powered by Techstars. How many people here know what Techstars is? It's a really, really cool accelerator network started by some of the smartest venture capitalists in the world. And they're involved with our Windows Azure Accelerator in Seattle. So if you're building a Windows Azure app, you can get direct involvement and like be on Microsoft campus for 3 months if you get selected. Being fun is even cooler. Microsoft is investing cash in some startup applications, between $50,000 and $100,000 in a convertible note. You don't have to be doing Bing search-oriented applications, but it doesn't hurt, I would think. So if you're doing anything related to mapping, anything related to anything that has a search or find or decision component to it, check out the Bing Fund. And if you have friends doing startups, remember that as well. Interesting moment in Microsoft's history that we're starting to invest more directly in software companies. So keep an eye on that. I wanted to finish with a message about partnering with an 800-pound gorilla. A lot of people partner with Microsoft or other big companies and think, you know, I'm going to join this partner program and I'm going to get leads from Microsoft, or I'm going to get, you know, my business is going to take off because I'm going to partner with Microsoft. That's rarely how it works. If you want to partner effectively with an 800-pound gorilla, you have to be the one leading the partnership, almost always. You have to figure out how to pull the levers, how to make an impact that's going to cause that partnership to take off for you. How do you do that? The image that I always have in my mind is one of a boat. This is an actual boat for sale on boats.com, so I figured I'm not hurting them by using this image. Microsoft's compensation mechanism is all about meeting commitments at the end of the fiscal year. In those, if you meet your commitments, you get a bonus. For some people, a very sizable bonus. If you don't meet your commitments, essentially, you don't get a bonus. Well, everyone wants a bonus, and since most people are doing pretty well, for some reason, I always think most people want to buy a boat with their bonus. They want to buy something tangible and somewhat frivolous with their bonus. So they're thinking about a boat. If you can figure out how to help a person at Microsoft or Oracle or whatever, if you can find out how to help a person at an 800-pound gorilla get their boat, you're going to have an effective partnership with Microsoft. So the key thing there is you're not partnering with Microsoft so much as you're finding the individuals within Microsoft who care about what you do. That's the key to partnering with an 800-pound gorilla, is making it not an asymmetrical partnership at all. Did I say anything about this being easy? I don't think I did. I haven't even completely figured this out yet, okay? And I've been here 6 years. But when I see it work, it's always that, you know, really core level business relationships kind of stuff where understanding, ask Microsoft, how are you compensated? What are your commitments this year? You know, what's your goal for this year? And if it's in your space and something you can do to help them with that goal, you're going to have an effective partnership, at least for that fiscal year. Everything kind of hits reboot at the end of the year. Does that make sense? Okay. A couple implications of that. In my opinion, you should partner with one large partner or with no large partner. So, let's say you have an enterprise-ish product that uses a database. And because we're developers at core and, you know, we think abstractly and want to support least common denominator, you naturally support SQL Server and, let's say, Oracle. Well, is Oracle or Microsoft going to want to partner with you? You could be in both of their partner programs. You could even have people who are interested. But let's say you have a solution for construction companies, you know, the biggest construction companies in the country. And for whatever reason, Microsoft and Oracle start fighting over these construction companies. It's construction companies, they can deal with it. And, you know, salespeople are going in trying to make deals. Is either of those companies going to go arm in arm with you and say, I want, you know, Acme construction product, you know, they're a great partner of ours? No. Each of those companies is going to look for the partner that when the customer buys that solution is only going to support their product. So from a pure business perspective, if that model is essential to your business, don't partner with both of them. Pick your partner and go on. Now, I've seen, I'm sure we've lost customers, but in the course of my job over 6 years, I've seen partners do this with us. And there's all these other side benefits. So for example, if you see that 90% of your customers are using SQL Server anyway, you're going to get an enormous benefit by eliminating all the testing and all this other blah, blah, blah requirement from supporting another database. And now you're going to be able to, instead of saying, well, I've got to stay ANSI compliant, no, you can use whatever crazy SQL Server features the team comes up with, because you don't have to worry about being compliant. And that's a trade-off that I think is, you really have to consider in, whether it's worth it to you. If partnering isn't important to you, then maybe that's not a concern. Then maybe if you support both, or maybe if your customers are 50-50 split, maybe it's a tougher decision. But I think that's important. Similarly, supposedly we have another version of Office coming out before long. I believe the code name is 15. So let's say Office 15 comes out, and you have a new idea for a product that would work great on Office. Obviously, if it's a new product, you're going to think, well, I'm going to start with the newest one. That's the way I would think. I'm going to start with Office 15. Someone mentioned the first day, I think it was Jonathan Lamke, large platform companies need stories, particularly at the beginning of product cycles. So if you have a great story on Office 15 coming out right as it's launched, there's a good chance somebody at Microsoft is really going to care about that and going to want to magnify your story. We're not going to get you leads, but we have a story magnification network that you can attempt to figure out and say, look at what I'm doing, look at what I'm doing. You have to spread your feathers like a peacock and look attractive to this team so that they'll take a picture of you and present it. So then you say, oh, this works on Office 15. I could so easily do this on Office 2010 and get all the benefit of those customers as well. Maybe. You have to make a business decision. Perhaps that's the right way to do it. Obviously there's going to be very, very few customers of the new product at launch, and you want all these customers of previous versions of the product. Recognize that that makes you less attractive for those stories. So while you see this, let's say there's actually 1 billion users of Office now as well. There are 1 billion Office users. So maybe you want access to all 1 billion of those Office users, but recognize that makes you stick out much less in the new one, which maybe you want to light up on. So I'm not saying to do one or the other. Obviously, I want you to support the new one, because that's what we're going to be caring about. But evaluate the business decision of whether you should support old version if you want to get any love from Microsoft on that. So on that note, does anyone know who the biggest competitor to Microsoft Office is? Anyone? No one wants to. What's the biggest competitor to Microsoft Office?
Open Office?
Open Office, Google Office, Google Docs? Not even close. Overwhelmingly, the biggest competitor to Microsoft Office is always the previous version of Microsoft Office. Overwhelmingly. So that story is very relevant to Microsoft. It's always hard competing with ourselves. All right, I talked too long. I apologize. I have questions. This is summarized. This deck, if you want the links, it's on bit.ly, ISVCon 2012, MSFT. And if my tweet timer worked right, I also just tweeted it at Patrick Foley.
It did.
It did?
Yes.
Yay! So, all right, I just tweeted it. Go plug in. Any questions? What were you going to ask?
So a follow-up question to that. Somebody asked, Christopher's talk, somebody else, about apps that connect the two. And so I'm wondering if you wanted to develop some kind of Metro app that was, like a dynamic thing that kind of showed into our. We have several different desktop apps, and we wanted to have sort of like a widget that would somehow connect to those different apps. Is there a way to do that?
I think the short answer is no, but there's always a way, right? So one way is to...
for example, we have like 12 different games. So if we were to maybe keep like a high score list, or like, or which games that you most recently played, or whose turn it is in which game. And, we want to have some kind of thing, because I can see some kind of a widget like that being helpful. Sort of telling them it's their turn, or a friend beat them, or whatever.
The short answer is no, but I can think of ways around it. So the canonical way would be to save that state remotely, Windows Azure, for example, even just Windows Azure Storage, and then they download the app, and it's you're building something like Xbox Live, where everything is the key things that you want to light up on that dashboard are sent remotely. That's how I would do it. The disadvantage of that is disconnected, obviously, and there's those moments where there might not be an update. So let's say for whatever reason you couldn't do that. Well, if you're installing fancy desktop apps and you couldn't do that, you could build let me see what I have running in Windows in Visual Studio 2012. I think I'm running a web server at the moment. So this is just a for example. When I designed CSS, I used garish colors so I can tell things apart. That's just something I was working on there. As an aside, Ted knows I'm evangelizing bootstrappingdesign.com, a book that makes programmers way better designers. I am such a fan of this book. I've always said, oh, I can't design. Yes, I can, and yes, you can. Bootstrappingdesign.com. We have no excuse for making ugly software for the rest of our lives. So I'm a huge fan of this guy. Anyway, so this is a website running on localhost at the moment. Let me verify for sure. This is the Metro IE. Hey, it ran. So that tells me I could just run a web server, right? If I'm running a web server on the desktop, I can send whatever I want. And I could just write to files, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of different ways you could make it work, but there's not like a programmatic interface to go back and forth. You can make it work, but it's not designed for that. Yeah?
I asked that very question a month back or so, when you understand blocks and concur. They went back and forth on this for a while and concluded that some kind of IP pipe was the answer between business and
You said they did implement it or did not?
They did. They concluded that that was the way to go. Some
Okay.
kind of IP connection.
Yeah, okay.
Loop back connection, you don't even need network.
There you go.
Could you say that louder?
TCP/IP is the way to go. You know, HTTP is on top of TCP/IP, and so that's what I was saying. Clearly, a web browser works. So if you dive further down that stack, you'll get to TCP/IP, do some sort of socket, or some sort of TCP/IP communication between the two, and there you go. Aaron,
How do you sell multiple licenses from Metro app?
like in bulk.
Well, you have a customer who wants to get it on all of their desktops.
Like
All of their business desktops. They're using Windows 8, it's a Metro style app. How would you then go ahead and sell that person 10 licenses?
I don't know a great answer off the top of my head. So this is the first thing that jumps to my mind. I apologize if I'm wrong. You know how to reach me, so we can follow up. But what I think I would do is make it a free app that had, if that were a common occurrence, I would make it a free app and handle the commerce separately. Download it from the Windows Store. But if my business depended on selling other small businesses 20 copies of software, that sounds to me, get the app in people's hands. And from a pure business user experience perspective, give them a taste. Give them and it can be a tiny taste. But here's the app. If you want it, here's how you unlock, however many appropriate licenses for your company. Which I believe Digital River, one of the fine sponsors of this conference, I think they're focusing on those kinds of scenarios. Or you can wire it yourself. Have them call you, take a credit card, and then flip a bit in the database. And, obviously, that works better for connected apps than disconnected apps. But for my money, why are you building disconnected apps anymore unless it's a true utility?